Hi, all. Thanks for joining. Welcome to ParadisoZoneworks, a podcast that explores the occult and esoteric arts from a personal, sometimes historical, and philosophical point of view. I'm Chaz. I'll discuss these topics with a special emphasis on Hecate and Chaldean theurgy. As this is my first episode, let me say a few words about where I'm coming from and try to give you an idea about why I want to talk about this stuff. First, I am a seeker. I've sought the palace of wisdom for 50 years, looking for truth, reality, and the miraculous. I don't have any authority to say the things I will say. Certainly, age doesn't give me any. There's no church I belong to, no direct revelation I can preach. It's just me, a poor hermit on the road looking for an honest person and a bowl of rice. Not that every now and then I don't have a little poetic inspiration that guides me. And of course, when I listen real close, I can hear my guardian daimon speaking to me. A word sparks a memory sparks some words. The Chaldean theurgists teach about the secret passwords that reality seeds our souls with. Sometimes those shine through the haze of the daily grind, and you begin to see a path in the darkness. And at the end of that path, there's light and a promise. Something that age does give you is lots of lived experience, episode after episode of lived experience in different backgrounds can produce something like a reality meter, an invisible gauge by which you measure the solidity and reality of things. That's where you have to determine what's true for you and your life and how you want to live it. I've lived many masks and roles: father, teacher, corporate cog, drunk, poet. All of these insight roles have taught me one thing or another. They've fed that muscle memory that is the backbone of my survival. I'm going to try real hard to make what you hear in this podcast as authentic as possible. If I quote someone else, then I'll let you know what I think about them and what they mean to me. Why is it important for me to say that? Because even though we grow up in the US thinking we have free will, that's not really true, is it? Genetics, upbringing, personal history, all of these conspire to make us who we are. And in insidious ways, we find ourselves doing stuff that we were programmed to do, either by our genes, what our parents said, or what society thinks. Even now, I catch myself doing things that my unconscious dredges up. That's not being in control. One of the things I want to explore is how we get beyond the programming. The great Greek theurgist, Iamblichus, talks about overcoming one's fate. For me, fate is the same as the programming we receive as part of our biological and social heritage. Can we really short circuit fate and begin to determine our own destiny? That's what I would like to investigate. I try not to hide from the truth, but I found that lying to yourself is an unending struggle. Where do I find the perspective to see that I'm lying? This is probably why sincere and authentic souls seek and believe in ineffable, infinite truth. Trying to see life from that infinite perspective shows you where you fall short all the time. And continually trying to reach that absolute is not so bad, is it? I ask because seeking an absolute anymore is like saying something profane. I understand that self-acceptance will get you through the day, but I also think you need to aspire to do and think great things. There's no way in hell that I'm the pinnacle of human evolution, which is how some folks act and talk these days. Just one more thing about authority. The Japanese philosopher Hajime Tanabe wrote an amazing book called Philosophy as Metanoetics, which is part confession and part spiritual revelation. Tanabe was swept up in the far war fever of Imperial Japan. In his classes, he actually exhorted young men to become kamikaze pilots, forerunners of today's suicide bombers. After the war, Tanabe experienced tremendous regret, guilt, and sorrow over what he and his nation had done. As a result, he tried to capture his repentance for his actions in philosophical and spiritual terms. Seeing how he had been duped into believing the war propaganda, he developed a philosophy that recognizes our humanity and its inability to ever reach absolute certainty. He espoused a philosophy of metanoetics, the Greek word for repentance, wherein we recognize our fallibility and even our propensity to commit evil. Recognizing human fallibility and the inability to attain absolute truth. Always being open to question and clarification must form the basis of all future spiritual work. Tanabe even critiques Zen masters, whom he calls saints, for falsely giving the impression that the truth they had attained was beyond question. He was, perhaps, criticizing as well the Buddhist community in Japan for not condemning Japanese militarism. A word about books. I'll be quoting a lot of books and writers in these podcasts, so I will say something that you have probably heard, something that I think has some weight. This is the notion of book learning versus life experience. From this perspective, you have to always balance out what you read with what you experience, and you have to choose your books wisely. Not all books are equal. Whether it is a book that teaches you how to become powerful or another that heightens your aesthetic awareness of reality, you have to always remember the writer is human just like you, and their agenda is not always conducive to living a good life, which I think is a goal we should all seek. That's not meant to be elitist. It's just my experience. I have been led astray by some writings, sometimes to my regret. All of this is just another way of saying that what I communicate here will always be open to question and verification. Use your reality meter to test my statements against your truth, and send me your questions in the comments section. So for now, let's get started. As you might have guessed, I'm going to spend the rest of the podcast talking about silence. Just to balance things out, the song is somewhat gloomy. Here's a line from a poem by Chilean poet Pablo Neruda. Green was the silence, wet was the light. The month of June trembled like a butterfly. That line expresses such wonder and awe with the moment, the world exploding into being from the womb of silence. So here are two extremes apparently living in the same place at the same time. Silence. What can we say about it? What should we say or not say? Perhaps if we talk too much about it, it will only produce the silence of meaninglessness, the type of silence Simon and Garfunkel sing about. Silence is multiform in both meaning and fact. Silence surrounds us and makes bare our existence in its most basic reality. Silence is mundane. It is transcendental. It comprehends reality and beyond. Perhaps echoing the awe expressed by Neruda, many religions extol the virtues of silence. Who can think of a Zen monastery without thinking of complete and absolute silence? Who can sit in an empty church without thinking silence is pregnant with something that some would call sacred? Who can climb the mountain peak and not be enveloped in the mountain's silence and grandeur? One emotion sparked to life by the disturbed rendition of the song is fear and anger. It's a valid emotion for many fear silence, afraid of those moments called awkward when the world seems ready to spiral out of control into an abyss of social terror, and anger follows fear. What is about silence that seems terrifying? Is it only in cities that silence terrifies? Is it nature's silence also terrifying? In surveys and polls, statistics show that one of the most terrifying things people fear is getting lost in the woods. How much of that fear involves the silence that the forest harbors? To allude to a popular movie, the woods are where you can scream and no one will hear you. There are different types of silence. There's the social silence Simon and Garfunkel sing about, like the one people call awkward, that happens between strangers or travel companions. There's the silence of the subway, plane, or mass travel. That silence bespeaks distances that sometimes seem to stretch into oblivion. They're so empty and ominous. Even with our intimate friends and families, there's that awkward silence that sometimes looms because it's filled with so many memories, sometimes harmful, sometimes harmless, sometimes joyous, sometimes monstrous. Silence harbors the unknown, the naked moment when we are stripped bare and all of a sudden revealing all of our secrets, whether there are desires, dreams, fears, everything we secretly cherish but don't want to share. No doubt all of these. Silence can be dangerous. There's the silence when we're alone. Here, the silence threatens to engulf you with your own self-concern, all the self-doubt, self-castigation, slicing and dicing your ego and id into bloody acts of self-revenge. Yeah, that silence hurts. It leads to violence one way or the other. Gotta shut that out. Many of these silences and the fear they bring can be assuaged with the help of others, perhaps professionals. But there are other kinds of silence, the ones that bring us to ourselves, that help us understand ourselves and others in the world. This is the silence where we find our dreams and aspirations come to drink at a peaceful stream and raise us up. This silence elevates something inside us. Perhaps you've experienced the silence of reckoning. This is where thoughts about yourself and the things and events in your life ask you to judge what they mean to you. This silence seems to demand, even command, your attendance on them. They want you to decide where they fit in your life or not. Those seem like hard silences to deal with as well. Those are the ones you try to put off dealing with as long as you can. I know I have, and I do. Being where I am in my life, I think I can fairly say that it's best for spiritual welfare to resolve these silences. The sooner the better. Don't let them rot there inside you. They'll putrefy and gum you up inside. There's the silence that you need to really dig for. You need to throw away all the trash and stuff that's talking to itself away in the corners of your mind and create a clean, level place that you can talk to and face yourself honestly and authentically. Silence is social. Once two individuals agree to a secret, there is silence. Here meaning an unspoken something that people agree to keep from the ears of others. There's the silence of the desert and of modern cities, so brutally yet beautifully captured by T.S. Eliot in his poem The Wasteland. Often, silence is not the absence of sound. It is letting sound be itself, freed of just being noise, unrestrained and free to be itself in the arms of the nothing. A Danish thinker whose last name means graveyard gave us some of the most profound insight into the human plight. For him, the silence of the heart, when in its throes of spiritual warfare, when we fret or feel ambitious and anxious about ourselves, that is because we are faced with spiritual and existential possibilities. In anxiety, we face the possibility of choosing how we will or should act to face reality. That great possibility of choosing he calls the nothing. The nothing is what silence brings to face with. Now I'm going to talk about a different kind of silence. This is silence that does not appear unless you invite it into your heart with all your strength of thought and desire. I live in the desert, up in the mountains. As you might guess, the desert has its silences, unique to itself, like most places. If the desert could speak, what would it say? What do they say about the desert? The desert doesn't give up its secrets. But that's perhaps not entirely true. Isn't it the desert where the great sinners and saints say we need to meet and find ourselves? The great prophet Jesus spent 40 days and 40 nights in the desert. He sought refuge from there when his enemies were chasing him from town to town. In those days, the desert was where the demons dwelt and chaos loomed. And Jesus did meet the devil there, and he overcame the power of evil and destruction. Jesus also had his secrets. Scholars call one of them the messianic secret. And didn't he tell his disciples parables and their meaning in secret and made them promise not to tell them to anyone else? That's the silence of the secret and the promise. Yes, the desert has its secrets, but they do not all stay silent. From the desert wilderness comes wisdom. That land of sea, sand, and desert, Egypt, has given us many treasures, not the least of which is wisdom. How amazed was the world when in 1945, Bedouin nomads found some old mud-caked documents in a place called Nag Hammadi. All of a sudden, from the silence of oblivion, we heard voices speaking about other worlds and visions of holy splendor, an entire alternative universe of religious reality suddenly appeared and began to take shape in the imaginations and the minds of seekers. And it hasn't stopped. Through war, rapine, destruction, and cultural appropriation, the Christian churches had done their best to skew history in their own image. They tried to still these voices, but the voices would not remain silent. From the darkness of time, silence began speaking to silence, and funnily enough, they speak of silence, the great creator, God nourisher, the silence of love and light. Here's one of the passages. The parent, the Father, whose name cannot be named, who came from the heights of fullness, light of the realms of light of the silence of forethought, and the Father of silence, light of word and truth. How strange to hear these words speak of light and silence as they resound across millennia of darkness and silence. This silence that is the ineffable, infinite, and overflowing silence of light. What can this silence do? All creative, all knowing, bringing clarity, wonder, and all to birth. From this silence of the transcendent reality originates oracles and prophetic dreams. Doesn't the goddess Hecate admonish us to practice the discipline of silence? Sigeche musta, keep silent, initiative. Silence, she says, remember from whence the truth of your being came. Yes, we have our occult secrets. The secrets one should not speak lest a sacred reality be profaned. a mystery divulged that exacts the vengeance of meaninglessness, that most pathetic and demonic silence. Silence, lest you lose the most cherished thing that makes your life worth living. In another oracle, Hecate too reveals the nature of the most holy of holy silences. He theothremoni, sige, ton pateron, God-nourishing silence of the Father. Here she reveals the God-nourishing silence, the silence that is a fiery echo of that great life-affirming power that gives birth to and sustains the universe. Even though we have only fragments left after the Christian fanatics destroyed the Chaldean oracles, we know that she asks us to seek the silence that opens up the vista and the path that leads to the oneness behind the many, the reality that nourishes our oneness with the universe. Seek the silence within, which you can become like gods, she says. Iamblichus and other theurgists teach us that we must approach the divine, cleansed of all impurities, spiritual and material. Silence helps us attain that state of purity by tearing away the gabble and babble that stop our thoughts with incessant and needless noise. And we fall into the silence. With all its fears and joys, our souls rise to ever greater planes of existence. And we experience that awe and wonder that the English poet William Blake wrote and sang about. To see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. We, you, me, her and him, we need to seek this reality. Our world is being killed. The great sacred chain of being that connects our souls and spirits to each other and to the fabric of life is disintegrating before our eyes. Act before it's too late. Seek the silence that defies all destruction and evil. That's my message for this day. May the peace of the great God-nourishing silence be with you, and the blessings of Hecate be upon you.